Welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. Figure that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. And, well, if I look at my little watch over here, we started that countdown early today. Whoa. Russ put out a tweet promoting the show this morning? What? Russ has a show rundown ready? Huh? Did he get a producer? Nope. Just got back from the Philadelphia Flyers game last night. A great game, if you like the tank. 6-3 loss to Calgary. We had Frostbee content going out prior to the game. God help us all. And not a great game, but certainly a good game for my productivity. Let me tell you that. We have a lot to get into today. Now, in case you missed it yesterday, I did drop an emergency pod about the Saquon Barkley signing, about the 2-year contract extension. We did talk about some of the cap savings, and then it kind of came out that those cap savings might not have been as dramatic. And actually, as of about a half hour ago, Spotrac, who we cited on the show yesterday, put out a clarification that when new contracts are announced, full cap breakdowns and cap details aren't immediately available, and then noted that it's their policy to update the new terms of the deal on their site. Any carryover cap for current year as a placeholder is what they use until new figures are made available. So Barkley's previous 7.361 cap hit is a placeholder until the new extension details are confirmed. So if you watched the emergency episode and you heard me wax poetic about Howie and about the fact that he's managed to save about $7 million on the cap, that may or may not be the case. We will wait until Spotrac updates, hopefully later in the day. Is it possible that they've gotten significant savings? Maybe. Is it possible they've had no savings at all? Also possible, but I'd encourage you that if you want my honest and immediate reaction to the Barkley extension, go check out that episode. It should be in your podcast feed. It's on YouTube. It's on X. It's on Facebook. It's like, an 18-minute episode or something like that. So it's not anything too crazy. I thought about actually starting today's episode by just kind of replaying that from yesterday, but then I thought that just seems like a kind of weird thing to do. So we can get into the Barkley extension here for a bit if we want, but there are a lot of things going on. Many, many things happening in the world of Philadelphia sports, and I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to try to keep the show a little bit shorter today because I'm trying to test out a few different things. So this probably won't be the hour-long extravaganza it typically is. We're going to try to go a little bit shorter today. We'll see if it works. We'll see how it works. We'll see how we're feeling, okay? We are in the midst of quite the week at Joy Media. We're going to call it, we'll look at the Joy Media umbrella here really quickly. So, did an episode of this show Monday, did an emergency episode on Tuesday, dropped a new episode of It's Just Wrestling reacting to Elimination Chamber, did a press row show last night. I've got this show today. Tomorrow is another episode of It's Just Wrestling, and a press row show at night. Friday is this show again. Oh, and by the way, in case you've missed the news, and they're going to probably announce it yet again, and then we'll do a bigger thing, but my friends Bob Wankel, Big Bet Bob, Anthony Sanfilippo, at Ant San Philly, they are taking what was a successful show with Crossed Up, and now we're just going to kind of energize it. We're going to bring it into the Joy Media sphere. So they have a new show coming that's going to be on the Joy Media YouTube account, and I believe they're going to set up their own YouTube account as well. But it's going to be a show called Fightin' Words. So if you're looking for a Phillies podcast, they're going to now be under the umbrella, which I guess now means that for better or worse, they're going to have to deal with me. And they may or may not make an appearance at some point on this show. So God help and God love both of them. But that's where we're at, my friends. The Joy Media umbrella continues to grow. So now we'll have this show 3 times a week. It's Just Wrestling is at least on Thursday. I might end up making it a Tuesday, Thursday show because there's just so much going on in the pro wrestling world. We'll see. And then we have Snow the Goalie, usually once a week, but this 2-week stretch, 7 home games in 11 days. Now we're down to 6 home games in 10 days. There's just a lot going on. And as HC says, Joy Media Takeover. Yeah, it's a big thing going on. We're working on it. HC actually asked an interesting question. Russ, are you still a teacher or is this your full-time job now? No and no. So no and no to both of those questions. I left teaching in 2021 to go take a job with the company that acquired Crossing Broad to write a lot of sports betting content for that company. That company has since been acquired by a much larger company I would argue, the best and the biggest sports technology company in the world. And now I do a variety of roles for that company. You'll notice that you don't see me blogging on Crossing Broad at all anymore. I still have the ability to do it. It's just a matter of time. And I've decided to put a lot of my time and effort into trying to grow a few shows here under the Joy Media umbrella. I have a really cool job. I really enjoy what I do. And I dare say that I might be pretty good at it. So that's like its own thing. Like that's a very large portion of my time. But then doing these shows is kind of like a labor of love. And it's like, I don't know, some of you might find this with the job that you have. Some of you will feel fulfilled professionally, but might not be fulfilled creatively. And so I enjoy my regular job a lot, and I feel professionally fulfilled. And there are times where I feel creatively fulfilled, I guess. But doing these shows is just something that brings me, pardon the pun, a lot of joy. And hopefully it brings a little bit of joy to your day as well. Otherwise, I don't know what we're doing here. So, no longer a teacher. I gave that up years ago. It's funny. I spent the money, took out the loans to go and get my Master's of Educational Leadership, got my principal's cert, was very much on track to go the admin route and probably have a successful career as an administrator. And then the opportunity presented itself. And so I got out of education, and I've been in the private sector, I guess, now for a few years. And will I ever go back to education? I can't envision a scenario where I would, but you never know. I mean, I'm pretty confident, no, but I do have that master's just sitting out there. All right. Greg Bondarenko, who was with us on the Press Row Show last night, says that AI article was short and sweet. So Anthony has been getting paid by the Associated Press to write up these game recaps. They're like 300, 350 words. It's like the best gig in the world, right? You just write a very generic game recap. You use a few quotes. You put together what happened in the game. It has to be done pretty much as soon as the game is over. And then if you're going to grab a couple of quotes, you just wait until they're in and then you submit it. And it pays pretty well from what I've gathered. But now the Associated Press is apparently doing this thing. And this is what's crazy to me. The Associated Press, which a lot of people kind of directly tied to the news and to being a reputable outlet of sorts, right? Not in the White House. But like they are viewed widely as one of the, I don't know, like most down the middle or newsy, whatever companies, right? The Associated Press sends people to games to write game recaps and then occasionally to write a side piece if there's something big that happened in a game. So anybody who's covering the Capitals right now, chances are they are also writing a side piece anytime Alex Ovechkin scores a goal on the in pursuit of Gretzky's goal-scoring record. But now the Associated Press has decided that non-NFL leagues, they're occasionally going to kind of pick and choose which game recaps are written by artificial intelligence, which seems kind of fucking crazy, okay? Seems legitimately nuts, okay? I don't understand it, and if it were me, I'd be kind of incensed. But then again, is there really an affinity for the Associated Press, and is there like a loyal following for the Associated Press? I'd say probably not. So people probably aren't going to be that upset, but I think it's kind of bullshit. I do. And I think that ultimately it's just a bad look. I get it, though. From a cost savings perspective, it's probably pretty brilliant, but you still need to have human eyes on the AI content. So while you don't have people sitting in the arenas writing the content now, you do have an editor or somebody that has to look over what happened in the game and then look over the AI-generated content and try to figure it out from there. I think it's kind of goofy, but whatever. It's not my company. Let's see. There are a lot of things. Jim Cochran notes with all the shows I'm doing that I'm out there as much as Jason Kelsey. Yes, but not nearly as wealthy. That would be swell. Maybe someday somebody will look at all of this work at Joy Media and say, yeah, this guy, he's got something other than a 5-head. Going to the barber today. Thank God. I don't think I'm going to cut these luscious locks that much, but like we got to do something with this 5-head situation. I think I told you guys this, but the other day my mom looked at me. I was going to take my wife on a date, and I like threw my hair back for a second. My mom goes, "You got to put," she's like, put some bangs on your forehead. You got to cover that up. And I looked at her and I said, this is your fault. You're the one with the 5 head. You gave it to me. My dad has a small forehead. My sister's got a small forehead. My mom gave me the big forehead. Has the audacity to tell me to cover that up with some bangs. What am I going to do? And I do like a cute little bowl cut with the flat bangs across the front? I think nay. Anyway. Allison is over on YouTube, says, YouTube notified me this morning. Woohoo! Yeah, I've been told that apparently YouTube has been going through some bug issues where people aren't getting notifications when shows go live, which kind of stinks. So I'm glad Allison is here. I hope that it's the case with everybody who's out there who subscribes. We're going to get here to the Flyers in a bit. I see some Flyers comments, so I want to throw all this together. Franco65 is here. A guy I get into spats with on Twitter sometimes. Said, I need a Trump impression, buddy. It's probably your best. LOL. I actually did something on Press Row Show last night during postgame. We brought the Trump speech up but muted it. And I went on a rant about Frost and Farabee. They're back, aren't they, folks? And we didn't like Morgan Frost unless you were Bill Meltzer. And Farabee. Nobody puts Beezer in the freezer, but the only thing freezing are his stats, aren't they, folks? Because he's not a very good player. He's probably a third liner. $5 million cap hit. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. We're going to make Calgary pay for it. And we don't miss him, do we, folks? We love Kuzmenko. He's great. Peltier. We don't know what to think about Peltier, do we? Now, we are going to have Peltier. He's going to work with some coaches. Maybe he'll be a good player. We don't know. But this offseason, Danny B, he's got a lot working. He's got a lot going, and it's going to be a lot easier because you just never know what's going to happen in the offseason. All right, I'm done. Let's see. Jamie has been having issues with the notifications on the YouTube. What's going on there? Let's see. Linda Joseph says, if Ant had been replaced by a robot, sort of, does that mean he'll go to post-game presser and ask Torts a question? Probably not. I don't know. Maybe. Highly unlikely. I don't think we're ever going to get a payoff to the Torts and Ant situation. It makes me kind of sad. We were very close at the Charities Carnival. Torts was like 80 yards away from us, petting puppy dogs and taking pictures with people. And I talked to a couple of people from the Flyers, and I said, hey, it'd be really funny. Like, just bring Torts over. Have Torts on the show. We can boot Anthony off. But, it'd be kind of funny. And then I said, Ant, I'll pay the $25 for you to get in line, and then we'll take your picture with Torts and a puppy. Ant won't do it. Made me sad. Made me really, really sad. Let's see. T from the TO3 asks, Russ, have you ever seen a TV market that won't air the doubleheader of the NHL Saturday? Flyers game ain't being aired on Saturday. I don't know. I didn't know that was a thing that's happening. That's strange. T from the TO3 also says, didn't get a notification today. Well, that sucks. I don't know what's going on. I find that upsetting. Let's see. Amy says, not sports related, but I read an article where the LA Times pulled their AI tool because it wrote an article praising the KKK. Oh, no. I don't know if that's true or not. If it is, woof. I can tell you that there are a whole bunch of implications with Google with writing AI content, and so I think it's a mistake for outlets to use it, but that's just me. Let's see. HC noting that the Kuzmenko goal was amazing. Sean C. says, Torts publicly saying multiple times he's going to ride Erson. The same springtime leaks are starting to show. It's okay, though. Mishkov points and a regulation loss. 2 thumbs up. All right, I guess we can get to that game a little bit from last night. I have a lot of things that I want to get to on today's show and try to do it in a pretty expeditious manner. Michael Sirkin here says, just got a notification for the live show at 8:43. What the hell's going on over at YouTube? I set the stream up last night. What is happening? YouTube. ¿Qué haces? ¿Ah? ¿Hay problema? YouTube. Anyway, let's get into some of what's been going down, because there are Flyers points to get to, and we could look at the 6-3 loss last night. We can look at what is coming in a couple of days, the trade deadline. We're getting even closer. There are a couple of things that happen in Eagles world, including some people now saying that the Eagles should somehow, for some reason, get rid of A.J. Brown. We'll get there in a little bit. And Howie Roseman looks like an absolute genius, and Howie had one of the most viral quotes I can remember in quite a long time, and we'll get there as well. And we have a nice quote from Ranger Suarez, who you might have noticed is on the thumbnail of the episode. And I have to call out a local radio host who, I don't know if this is desperation because the ratings are bad or what, but some of the dumbest shit I think I've heard in a long time. And how dumb was it? I ran it past San Filippo, who I agree with on very little, and he and I were both perplexed. And then I presented it to Bundy, who was also like, what the actual fuck is that guy talking about? So we're going to get there as well. Where do we start today? Where do we start? I guess we could start a little bit of Flyers, and then we'll get to the other stuff. Flyers got pounded last night, 6-3. Sam Ersson gets chased with 10 minutes and 28 seconds to go in the first period. For those who are not hockey literate, that's very bad. That is certainly not a good thing. So Ersson, who's supposed to be your number one, who had a really good game in the Four Nations against the U.S., it's not been great since the break. And given how many games they have coming up at home, 6 more in 10 days, stands to reason they're going to ride him a bit. We will likely see Fedotov. Will we see Kolosov? I don't know. But Fedotov had to come in relief, made a few really good saves, gave up a bad goal to give Calgary their 4th goal of the game. Ultimately, Fedotov doesn't have the strongest showing, but he's decent enough. There's an empty net goal that makes the final score look even worse. That game, in and of itself, there are frustrating things about it. It looked like Mishkov had his 20th goal, which was then given to Couturier, so we don't have the Matty Mishkov hits 20 goals. I'm sure there's some people with the futures bets out on all the different sportsbook apps that are probably very sad this morning. The good news is Mishkov, since the Four Nations break, has looked so good and looks re-energized as a player that he will get to 20 goals. He may even get past it. Is there an outside chance that he could get you to, where was he at? I think the over-under going into the season was around 62 points. I think there's a very good chance that he goes over the 62 points. I think I made a bold take that he could get to 80 points in one of his first 2 seasons. So it does appear as though that's going to be in play. The kid looks really good. The negative, I guess, at one point this season is he looked exhausted. He looked physically, maybe even mentally fatigued. He's said as much. That Four Nations break, for better or worse, for a guy who's never had to play this many games and done the kind of travel that you have to do in the NHL, that seemed to kind of give him a hard reset, which is a very good thing for a young player. Travis Konechny, on the other hand, did not get a break, nor did Travis Sanheim, and it would be fair to say that neither of those guys have looked incredibly impressive since the Four Nations break. Now, we did a breakdown of Konechny's stats. He has 10, going into last night, he had 10 points in his last 15 games. So it's not as if Konechny has totally fallen off the wagon and is no longer an effective player. But for a guy that you gave such a big contract to in the offseason, you expect him to be a point-per-game guy. Now, he's not quite off that pace. It's, 0.67 points per game over that 15-game stretch. But you expect him to be more of an impact player, especially as a scorer. I think that one of the things that is going to continue to be held against him, could be held against a Mishkov, can be held against a Tippett or even a Forster is, this team just doesn't have centers. This team just doesn't have a high-quality center. Torts, for all the lineup juggling that he likes to do, there's no cure-all. There is no Claude Giroux in the center, in the middle of the ice, playing a 200-foot game at a high level that can facilitate and set up these wingers to score. Couturier is not that guy. When he was healthy, he could sort of be that guy, was certainly a decent enough setup guy. Didn't have the same kind of vision and the same kind of top-end skill that a Giroux had. But he's certainly not that guy now. Noah Cates has looked like maybe your best center, which is not necessarily a great sign. Scott Laughton certainly is not that guy. They have some things that they're going to have to work out on this long homestand. And it's kind of murderer's row. Like, in theory, this should kind of fall off the tracks pretty soon. There are people who will look at the playoff standings and point out that the Flyers are still very close to making the postseason, but I tend to want to live in the real world. I tend to want to live in the world where the Flyers should exist, which is looking at the draft lottery And I know that there are people who hate the idea of looking at the draft pick, and they hate the idea of, oh, you can't tell players to tank. No one's telling the players to tank. No one is certainly trying to tell John Tortorella to tank. But if we're being real here, I think the Flyers are going to try to make the playoffs next year, and I very much view this as the last year that they are willing to be bad, or that they are at least open to the idea of being bad. And so the only way that you can make the most of what is probably the final season of trying to get it some kind of elite or very good talent in the draft is this season. And to that end, the Flyers wake up this morning with the 7th best odds of getting that number 1 overall pick. Now, granted, it is a very small percentage, a 6.5% chance of jumping up to the number 1 overall pick. But we've now made this part of the show. This is now as much of a fundamental piece of the part of the fabric of this show as anything else. We are going to go over to Tankathon really quick, and we're going to take a goosey gander, and we're going to spin this. Now, if you remember the other day, we spun the simulator, and the Flyers ended up with the top pick. Now, mind you, 7th best odds, 6.5%. Let's hit that lottery. Dun, 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 dun. And fuck, they fell to 8th. All right, well, maybe this is broken. Now, we only do one sim at a time. In this scenario, look at this. Buffalo jumps 3 spots up to number 1. Utah. Why does Utah get to jump up to number 2? The Flyers would fall to 8. Now, remember, I'm going to continue to repeat this because I know that there are always new people checking out the show. The draft lotteries for the top 2 spots. Your goal, or what should be your goal if you're the Flyers, right? They're right here at number 7. There we go. They're right here at number 7. 62 points, 62 games played. There is a jumbled up mess of teams. You can probably go back about as far as Buffalo at 54 points through 60 games. It is possible, if you're the Flyers, to somehow get into that 4 or 5 range. And given the gauntlet of games that are coming up soon and are coming up throughout the month of March, it's entirely possible they could fall somewhere into here. Now, Boston has Marchand apparently on the trade market. Is it possible that Boston is going to look to maybe not tank, but they're certainly not opposed to the idea of falling back? That adds another variable to this. It certainly does. Boston 3-5-2 in their last 10 games. They've lost back-to-back games. Things aren't going well for them. Pittsburgh, we all know, is essentially done. It seems inconceivable that Pittsburgh's going to try to add at the deadline. So if you are a Flyers fan and you're looking at this, Pittsburgh's not going to all of a sudden go on a major run and try to push for that final playoff spot. Crosby will try. Malcolm will try. I mean, that team will try, but they're probably not going to be good enough to get into the playoffs. It would be great for the Flyers if Pittsburgh did get hot. That would be awesome because then it kind of pushes you down. So the reason I bring this up, lottery is for the top 2 spots. So in a worst-case scenario, if you're the Flyers and you have the 7th worst record in the league or 7th, fewest points, if you were to get jumped by 2 teams, you would then pick at number 9. My point all along has been try to get to that 4 or 5 spot. At least then you're picking somewhere in that 5-6 range. And I get it. This draft right now, especially the way that the pundits are talking about it now, is a 3-player draft, maybe with a 4th player who's a little bit of a tier down, and that 5 through, let's say 17 are essentially the same quality of player. And I'm very consistent about this. While that may be true, you always want to have more options. So the idea of having, 10 different guys that are on your list at number 5 versus having 1 or 2 left at number 17 or 18, I'd rather give the scouts the ability to say, hey, we are confident in this player at number 5, rather than say, well, we hope that one of these 2 guys who are remaining actually are going to be the diamond in the rough in this draft, okay? I'm very simple. I'm a very simple-minded human being, okay? The Flyers can't actively tank. We get it. But it would be good for this franchise if they did pick as high as they possibly could. And I will once again point out that while Matvei Mishkov, to some extent, has been the karmic payoff, we'll say, because Mishkov probably should have been the number 2 overall pick in his draft, and he fell to number 7, and Flyers picked him up. That may be karmic justice. I will say that's karmic justice for Nolan Patrick not working out. But I'm still waiting on the karmic payback and the karmic repayment from the hockey gods for getting James Van Riemsdyk instead of Patrick Kane. So I would love to see the Flyers somehow jump into that top spot or the second spot in this draft, get that one more elite potential player, and then you flip the script in the offseason and you try to go out. Maybe you offer sheet a guy. I keep saying Wyatt Johnston would be a very interesting player from Dallas, a center, 22 or 23 years old, fits the timeline perfectly, could be a great fit with this team. Will they go the RFA route? I don't know. Will they get active on the trade market? I don't know. But what I do know is I expect Danny Briere to be pretty aggressive this offseason. And I think the team will ultimately make enough moves to make the playoffs next year. So this is probably your last chance for that elite talent. Hopefully it works out for the Flyers and they're able to get that guy in the draft. That's where I'm at on the Flyers. Now, in the midst of all of this, and I just saw something happen over in the comments. I just saw this happen over in the comments. Allison goes, "Where's Ford? Did he not get a notification?" Landros then said, "Don't say Ford 3 times, Allison, or he will appear." And what happens, my friends? Ford is here. Ford is here. Says I actually do work, guys. So, he's here. And it just goes, see, it worked 3 times. Sean C. notes, Frank Saravalli claims the Leafs rejected Laughton for Minton straight up. I don't believe that. I really don't. So here's what we know. And here's where things kind of stand. And I want to try to weave in and out of what's going on there, and then we'll move on to Phillies and Eagles and everything else. The report came out yesterday that there are as many as 8 teams interested in Scott Laughton, which is great news. If you're somebody like me who actively wants to see this team lower the ceiling, lower the floor, one of the best ways to do that is by trading some of your better players. Now, Scott Laughton isn't an elite player by any stretch of the imagination. Let's not get crazy here. But he's a good player. And the fact that Scott Laughton getting dealt could make this team at least a marginally worse team, it is good for Team Tank. Darren Dreger put this out yesterday. As many as 8 teams swirling around the Flyers with calls on Scott Laughton. The center market is shrinking, so Briere is in no rush. First-round picks are in play, but there could be room for improvement as the week unfolds. Now, in fairness, I think we have for a very long time, we've discussed the possibility that the Flyers are looking for a first-round pick in exchange for Scott Laughton. Now, I want to say it was 18 months ago, there were murmurs going around that there may have been a team that offered a first-round pick for Scott Laughton. In a little bit more recent history, it's been around a second-round pick. A second-round pick doesn't get it done. They're not going to deal Scott Laughton for a second-round pick. They just won't. Should they? I don't know. For as critical as I can be, and for as hypocritical as it may seem, I don't think you just sell Scott Laughton for spare parts. Is he a guy that I think ultimately on ice is a very valuable player to this team right now? No. Is the locker room leadership thing real? Yes. Is the being a highly respected player in that locker room real? Yes. Do I think that they can survive trading Scott Laughton? I do. Now, we talked about this on the Press Row Show last night, but if there are 8 teams, and let's say 3 teams by the deadline on Friday, they come to the Flyers, all of the packages are similar, right? Let's say that it's 3 teams that offer a first-round pick for Scott Laughton. They'll be late first-round picks. The Flyers will probably look to Laughton and say, all right, which of these 3 teams are you good to go to? If he says none of them, they're going to say, listen, Scott, we're willing to help you out to an extent, but you got to pick one. I think they'll defer to the player. Now, could that be the difference between picking 27th and 26th? Sure. But for the organization, I think it's better as a whole for them to show, not just to the player, but to the agent and then league-wide, that he gave a lot of years, he gave a lot of hard minutes to this team, and that when push came to shove, they still gave the player a little bit of input in where he goes. Now, if it's the difference between, hey, we have to send you across the country to Winnipeg for a first-round pick, or we're going to just send you a little bit north up to Toronto and take a second-round pick, and Laughton says, well, I'd rather go to Toronto. It's yeah, I'm sure you would, but sorry, buddy, you got to go to Winnipeg. It's a first-round pick. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But 8 teams being interested in the player, to me, is pretty wild. I'm interested to see what happens because Toronto has been interested, not just in Laughton, but they've been interested for over a year in Rasmus Ristolainen. And if you pay attention to Twitter enough, there are people that are starting to kind of connect dots. Is there a chance that the Flyers could look to package Laughton and Ristolainen together and send them up to Toronto? Here's the problem. Toronto doesn't have a first-round pick this year. They do have one in 2026, but are the Maple Leafs going to feel good about trading their 2026 first after they already don't own one in 2025? Hard to say. If they really believe in pushing all the chips in, Laughton, hell of a guy to add to your lineup as you're going into the playoffs. Certainly not a top-end talent, but certainly a guy who makes that bottom six on your team fortified and is a better player than they have currently available to them in their bottom six. Risto, right-handed defenseman, big body, theoretically should finally get to show what playoff Risto looks like. And he's had a bit of a booming shot, especially of late. Toronto could do worse than getting Laughton and Risto. Now, if they offer you a 2026 first-round pick and maybe another conditional pick and maybe a prospect, you have to consider it. You certainly have to think about it. If you were to package those, or if you were to split those guys up, could Scott Laughton get you a first-round pick if there are really 8 teams interested? Yeah, there's a possibility that there will be a first-round pick going for Laughton. And separately, if you put Risto on the trade block, could you get a first-rounder for Risto right now? I think you probably could. So if you're the Flyers, do you feel the need necessarily to put those two together to only get a 2026 first-round pick? Probably not. So the Flyers right now are in a very interesting place 2 days out from the deadline in that they kind of have to do the calculus on what's our best-case scenario with these guys individually. What is our best-case scenario if we package them together? Do you get a third team involved where an asset comes from that third team? I don't know. But I can tell you this. It's going to be a very interesting trade deadline, and I don't think it's one that's going to end with the Flyers standing pat. A year ago, Danny Briere sat in a hotel conference room, I believe, and said, we're not going to take market value for Scott Laughton. We need above market value for Scott Laughton. I think that they're about to get it. I really do. I think that they're about to get it. If we get through this trade deadline and no other players are moved, you'll hear a much more critical version of me on Friday. But I think there's a very good chance they move on from Laughton this Friday. Now, I will have an episode of the Russ Joy Show Friday morning. That is the plan. There will probably be a post-deadline show. It'll either be on this channel or it'll be over on Snow the Goalie. I don't know which one yet, but there will be some kind of a recap as long as the Flyers make a move, and presumably they will. Hell, they might trade Laughton today or Thursday, and then Friday morning we're talking about it on the Russ Joy Show. I don't know. So don't hold it against me. I really don't know. All right, where do I want to go next? Let's bring a little bit of levity to things, okay? Now, I will warn you that if you have children with you, this next quote might not be the most kid-friendly thing. So I'm gonna issue you the 10 to 15 second warning. I'm gonna bring the clip up on the screen. You can mute, and then when the clip is over, I'll probably have a perfectly rational take on it, and I'll try not to be. This is one of the best quotes that I've heard from a Philadelphia executive in a very long time. So Howie Roseman gets asked about winning his first Super Bowl versus winning his second Super Bowl. And he's over on the McShay Show, part of the Ringer Podcast Network, brought to you by Pearl Jam. Howie Roseman compares winning the first Super Bowl and winning the second Super Bowl, and he uses an anecdote that maybe some of the fine folks who are in the comments section or listen in the podcast feed can kind of understand. He compares it to something that we, again, if there are kids in the car, just mute here for the next 30 seconds or so. Howie, how do you compare the first Super Bowl to the second one?
Is this PG rated or PG-13?
Whatever you want.
Yeah. So I'd say the first one's almost like, can I say this, Bob?
Yes,
can we delete this? Is this live? You don't know what I'm saying? You don't know what I'm saying?
This is the best part. You can be you.
It's almost like the first time you have sex. You're so glad you had sex. It's not even the quality of it. The second time,
that's actually great.
The second time, it's like, wow, I could actually have fun and enjoy this. And so I would say, and Bob just had sex for his first time.
So we have a beautiful moment there, and it's right at the very end of the clip. I don't know who Bob is, But Bob caught a stray in the worst way at the end of that clip. But Howie compares the first time versus the second time. And like, is it an apt comparison? I don't know. I guess you have to kind of go back in the memory bank and think about the first time and the second time. And you go, oh, okay, yeah, I get it, Howie. Now, if you remember, I like to think of it from an anxiety perspective, let's say, right? Instead of we'll go anxiety. That first Super Bowl that the Eagles won, for many of us, or for people my age, it was only the second time the Eagles had ever been in the Super Bowl in our lifetimes, right? We watched Donovan McNabb throw up in the huddle against the Patriots. And so you have all of this negative energy that just kind of follows you because you have all those years of underwhelming performance. And then you got to Super Bowl 52, and like the franchise quarterback goes down, or the guy that you thought was going to long-term be the franchise quarterback, and Carson Wentz goes down, and you have backup Nick Foles in, and you're going up against Brady and Belichick and this Patriots dynasty, this thing that just seems unbeatable. And there's a lot of stress throughout the game. And hell, even the way that Super Bowl 52 ended, where Tom Brady gets to bomb one deep, and Al Michaels is kind of deadpanning the entire thing, and the ball kind of bounces off some hands and then falls, and then you try to look at the clock, and then you realize, oh my God, the game is over. And then there's still part of you that's like hanging on, waiting for a late flag, because why wouldn't that happen? And then when you finally realize, oh my God, it happened, all that anxiety kind of like subsides, and there's elation that it happened. But like, if you look back on the entire experience of it, there were a lot of nerves, right? So maybe it is an apt comparison by Howie. Whereas this Super Bowl was like, know what to expect. I think we're going to have a little bit more fun with this. And then the way that it ended up playing out, if you were an Eagles fan in Super Bowl 59, you had a lot of fun along the way. Not only did you have a lot of fun, but you got to the end and you were like, oh yeah, that was awesome. So maybe Howie actually did make a really good comparison. But again, I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was one of the funniest things. And like Howie's delivery, Howie doesn't have a lot of bass in his voice, and I say that as a tenor myself. Not a lot of bass in the voice, and so it almost comes off as like a nerdy thing. Howie, good on you. Good on you. Now, there are people who have been waxing poetic about Howie Roseman of late, and one of them is Dan Orlovsky, who was back on TV, although he was on McAfee's show, and he sort of made it sound like he's back for a few days a week for the next few weeks, but then told McAfee and his team that like he hasn't signed a new contract with ESPN. But Dan Orlovsky is absolutely in love with what Howie Roseman is doing, and specifically what Howie Roseman has done by re-signing and extending Saquon Barkley and rewarding a player who rushed for over 2,000 yards and set the single-season record between regular season and postseason for most yards in a season. Dan Orlovsky had a lot of good things to say about Howie Roseman and about what he has done as the head of this Eagles team. Now, I mentioned this on the emergency pod. We're all going to like have great moments, and like people are giving the flowers to Howie, and they should. But like none of this happens without Jeffrey Lurie putting a lot of money up front, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But I want to get over to Orlovsky, who had a lot of great things to say about Howie Roseman and why the 2-year extension to Saquon Barkley was such a big deal. So let's go over to Orlovsky really quick, and then we'll keep going from there.
For going back, I think like 10 years, they were always, or one of the teams that was always paying guys a year early. Like so often teams wait till, and places wait till the person's contract up or a player's contract is up, and it's till like the very end of it. And I remember, I thought they did it maybe with like Fletcher Cox and Lane Johnson, where they just choose to pay, hey, we drafted you, you're in your second year, we're just going to extend you because.
Remember, they did this with Carson Wentz, too, and that was actually one of the things that dogged Howie for a bit. And, like, when you think about the dead cap that can happen by cutting a player, the Eagles do play with fire a lot with the way that they guarantee money up front. There could be void years at the end of contracts, and if things were to go sideways, it could derail the team. Howie's most masterful job was getting rid of Carson Wentz because he gave him the contract early, and then that could have crippled this franchise. But because they were willing to find a trade partner, he was able to mitigate any potential damage.
we know you're a good player and whatnot. So Philadelphia, I mean, right now it's the best roster in football, clearly, and it certainly seems like they've added it. But it's awesome to see. It's one of the reasons why it seems like those people love playing there is how he does take care of them. And so it's big time for them.
Yeah, I agree.
So this is a whole thing, and I talked about this on the emergency pod, so seriously, go back and check that one out. It always helps the channel when you go back and watch things. But this is a statement not just to players in the league, not just to agents in the league. This is a message to the entire league as a whole, that Philadelphia is willing to pay you exorbitant amounts of money up front, $36 million, I believe, to Saquon Barkley up front as soon as he signs the 2-year extension. They're willing to give you all this money up front. Jeffrey Lurie is more than willing to give you a ton of money right now today based on your past production. Saquon Barkley has 2 years left on his first contract that he signed with the team. But this team, after he rushed for 2,000 yards, said, you know what? We're going to reward you with this extension. We're going to give you $36 million guaranteed. You helped us win a Super Bowl, and we want you here longer term. We don't just want you for 2 years. We want you for what'll be the next 4 years. And that just sends a great message to potential free agents. Now, mind you, and I did say this at the start of the show, it's a little bit tricky because no one seems to know right now what kind of cap savings the team has. I mentioned at the top of the show, Spotrac, they didn't backtrack on what was reported yesterday, right? There were people who were kind of going off of what Spotrac had for last season's cap hit versus the upcoming one, where it looked like it was a $7 million savings. We should hopefully know within a day or so what those savings are ultimately going to look like. But it's an interesting place for the Eagles to be because they do have some key free agents coming up. And if this extension is able to allow them to kind of reconfigure that cap hit for next year, does it make a signing of Mekhi Becton easier? Does it free up money to bring back Zach Bond? Does it give you the ability, if you want to bring back Josh Sweat, to do so? Does it give you that cap flexibility that if and when Cleveland ultimately finally warms up to the idea of trading Myles Garrett, that could happen? A name that gets thrown around a lot, as well as Max Crosby. Are there players that the Eagles have eyed up that they know we need to clear up some cap space to be able to bring those guys in? It's possible. And if you're a free agent, you're not looking to take a short-term deal. But if you were, or if you were to sign with the Eagles, and if you were to help deliver a Super Bowl, now there's this precedent of what they just did with Saquon Barkley, where if you're a free agent, you go, all right, Barkley got $36 million up front, and there's another $15 million in incentives and escalators that he could get in that deal. There has to be a part of you as a free agent that says, yo, I could go to one of the best teams, or one of the fan base. I don't think the fan base thing actually matters, but you'd be like, I can go to one of the best places to play football, one of the teams that is easily a favorite to win the Super Bowl next year, a team that has a wide open potential window, a team that is very committed to building a dynasty of their own. Oh, and by the way, I could get a lot of upfront money, and I could potentially get additional incentives. Oh, and by the way, I could win a Super Bowl. That's kind of hard to turn down. Will there be teams that are going to be able to outbid the Eagles on players? Maybe. But if you care about a little bit more than just the money, the Eagles are a great option. There is even a case to be made that if it's a few $1 million less, but you have the ability to earn those incentives or escalators, maybe you do bet on yourself if you're a free agent. I don't know. I can't get in the minds of these free agents, but it's an interesting place to be. And again, this is all because Howie is willing to structure contracts the way that he does, and that Jeffrey Lurie is more than willing to put that money out up front. Now, there's a crazy thing that's happening around the Eagles. There's this belief out there, this thought that like the Eagles might move on from A.J. Brown. And so we're going to first go out to New England radio, because this I thought was like one of the craziest things. And this was circulating yesterday over at WEEI. They were trying to convince themselves that, A.J. Brown might be in play for the Patriots. Now, mind you, there are going to be other players that are going to be available to teams that need that need wide receivers. Devontae Adams was released. God, the Jets, man, what a freaking mess. They sold out to get Rodgers. They finally made a trade too little too late to get Devontae Adams. And now Rodgers is gone and Adams is gone. I think he's actually a pretty good option if you're the Patriots or if you're another team that's looking for a wideout. But I want to go over here because over on WEEI, they were talking about whether or not A.J. Brown could be legitimately in play from the Eagles.
With all the different receiver names that are out there and T. Higgins getting tagged and, potential trade options, is the dream dead for A.J. Brown? I know he just won the Super Bowl, but he is the most connected to Mike Vrabel.
I love that.
All right, so they're going with the idea of the Vrabel connection because of their time in Tennessee. Woof.
It's a crazy
great.
offseason. Could that happen?
I love A.J. Brown, and I love the fact that you actually are sensible enough to go back to A.J. Brown.
By the way, for people who listen to the podcast feed who don't know, Tom E. Curran is the Patriots insider for NBC Sports Boston. That's who's on the phone.
Instead of barking up the T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, both and Ayuk, who are
Higgins
just
and Metcalf aren't getting
not going to happen. A.J. Brown is a much more reasonable get.
Is he?
Why would the Eagles divorce themselves from him?
Correct.
I don't know exactly but I think that's reasonable. I also think
So I'm actually going to leave it there. There's this belief out there that, will the Eagles move on from A.J. Brown? Which, guys, I got to tell you, I think is one of the, most harebrained things going right now in NFL Twitter is the idea that the Eagles might move on from A.J. Brown or that they would feel the need or the desire to move on. But listen, who's one of the only people in media or that is a talking head that I actually enjoy and respect? Not all of you do, but I do. Colin Cowherd. So Colin Cowherd goes over on his podcast, and he doesn't throw fuel on the fire, but he offers up his reason behind why he thinks the Eagles should consider moving A.J. Brown in the offseason. Now, again, I don't agree with the line of thinking, but we'll just propose this because Cowherd's not exactly the least plugged-in guy in national sports media. We'll hear him out.
I would move off A.J. Brown because you're so good at running back, O-line, quarterback, tight end, and Devontae Smith. I think that's an easy one.
Yeah, to me, the A.J. Brown one would only be if they feel that relationship that Brandon Graham kind of let the cat out of the bag and then they tried to walk it back. It's like, come on. But
that's a really good point. If they think that the relationship can't be mended or if there is an actual issue between Hurts and Brown and it's an irreconcilable difference and they think it's going to blow up again, all right, then maybe that's the only way. We'll continue.
Winning cures all and their relationship. I mean, he had a touchdown in the playoffs. He is, when healthy, one of the best, 4, 5, 6 wide receivers in the league.
Yes.
Bingo.
Yes.
I think the only way they would do something like that would be to clear up some movement if they could get Myles Garrett. And by all accounts, they are going to be one of the lead dogs in those moves.
I don't see a scenario where the Eagles move off of A.J. Brown specifically to try to get Myles Garrett. I don't think that makes a ton of sense. No matter what you think about Jalen Hurts and his abilities and him as a passer, all that, you don't actively take away arguably his best threat through the air. And I love Devontae Smith. And there may be a case to be made that Devontae Smith ultimately will be a better receiver than A.J. Brown. But as things are currently in place with this team, there's no reason to move off of either of these receivers. None. Unless there is that legitimate concern that within the locker room, Brown is going to become toxic. But I just don't see it. It feels like this is just a lot of people trying to find a weakness within the Eagles. They're looking for a talking point because we are now in the throes of the end of the NBA and NHL regular seasons. Baseball is on the horizon, but the NFL is still king. It's still the ratings king. I think that this is just kind of like a little bit of desperation on the part of different content outlets. I don't see a move of A.J. Brown happening anytime soon. Now, I have two other things that I want to get to, and I said it was going to be a half-hour show, and I've already blown past that, but we can get in under an hour. Ranger Suarez, who is going to be part of, maybe, I don't know, arguably one of the best players, one of the best rotations the Phillies have had in recent memory. Man, do I want to put them up with the four aces? No, but I think it's a damn good rotation. You don't have you don't have a guy in this rotation that you don't believe in at the back end of it. Like, there have been seasons, right, where we've all supported the Phillies, and the fourth and fifth starters have been like bad or mediocre at best. And if you look at this team, and if you look at this rotation of Wheeler, stud, Christopher Sanchez, damn, that talked about this on Monday, but the fastball going up to 98 miles an hour in spring training, like if that happens, very good. Could he grow into and develop into being a stud? It's possible. Aaron Nola, not a stud, but a reliable enough pitcher. There are certainly worse number 3 starters in Major League Baseball. He might be the best number 3 starter in all of Major League Baseball. You have Jesus Luzardo. Don't really know too much what to expect. Can he stay healthy? If so, he might be the best number 4 starter in baseball. And that leaves with Ranger Suarez, who, like, man, a year ago, people would have said is probably the second best pitcher in the rotation. Or if you were a Nola fan, you'd say Ranger Suarez is the third best starter in the rotation. For him to be your number 5, like, that's absurd. Like, okay, just play this one out with me a little bit, okay? When you go back to the 4 aces and Average Joe, and we love Average Joe, if you go back to that rotation, you had Roy Halladay, stud. Halladay and Joe Blanton. Oh, we got fireworks. I don't know what I did to get that, but I love that. Halladay and Wheeler, they line up pretty damn comparably, right? I still think Halladay has the edge, but like number 1 bona fide studs. Christopher Sanchez, Cliff Lee. You give the nod to Cliff Lee. There was a Cy Young with Cleveland and an excellent performance in the 2009 World Series. Kind of hard to give the edge to Christopher Sanchez, but okay. Then you have Cole Hamels, Aaron Nola. And I mean, if you think about it, Hamels probably had better upside, but they could both get you a lot of innings. Part of me thinks that Hamels was still more reliable, but Hamels did have a horrific 2009 postseason where he also kind of said that thing about like just waiting for the season to be over, which was odd. So you had that. Roy Oswalt and who am I at? Jesus Luzardo. Oswalt was certainly not the pitcher that he had been with Houston, but was still very good. Luzardo has the injury concerns. Does Luzardo have higher upside at this point in his career than Oswalt did that season? Maybe. So maybe you give the edge to Luzardo. And then you get to the 5th start. You get to Joe Blanton, and you have Ranger Suarez. And you say, I mean, in theory, Suarez has proven to be a better pitcher or has a higher upside than Blanton did. But, like, think about how crazy that is. Like, that rotation was absurd in every way. And if you're being fair about it, there's a case to be made that this Phillies rotation, if healthy, could be as good or maybe even better than that one. Which brings it all back to the actual issue at hand, which is this fucking lineup. And the fact that this team did nothing to materially improve it. The failure to get another impact bat could ultimately be the thing that derails the season. And I'm looking in the comments, and I'm looking at what people say. And you get somebody like Ford who says none of the pitching will matter if the Phillies don't get situational hits. You can get Connor Allen saying, fast forward me to late September and October to see if the lights are too bright again. Sixers 2.0 if it happens. The questions are around this lineup. Now, I've said this a bunch of times, but like, if you're able to get Trey Turner to look anything like he was supposed to, then that maybe makes a slump-proof lineup. Maybe. But I have a really hard time looking at this lineup and saying, oh, no, we're in good shape there. The lineup is still a concern. Now, could they look to add at some point during the season? I hope so. I really hope so. Because Max Kepler is not the guy who's going to take this lineup to another level. We'll see what happens throughout the season. But like, the more I think about it, the more I go, you know what? This rotation is going to keep you in a lot of games. This rotation is going to feel the pain of being let down. Aaron Nola, God bless his soul, has been probably the guy who's been the most negatively impacted by this lineup going cold, where he puts out quality start after quality start and has nothing to show for it. These pitchers are probably going to get frustrated this season with it. But anyway, I bring all this up because Ranger Suarez, who was mentioned in potential trade rumors all offseason, he had something really interesting to say about being a member of the Phillies and about his future. I'm going to try to skip around because there's the Spanish quote and there's the English translation. Let's see if I queued this up correctly.
This is my childhood club, my childhood organization. I've played here since I was young and really young, and all I think about is staying here. I want to pitch here for the rest of my career.
So that is the standout quote. It's his childhood team. It's the team that drafted him. It's the team that he wants to spend the rest of his career with. It's going to be tricky because if Suarez can't stay healthy, he's not going to be able to get the kind of contract he's going to want. Andrew Painter is on the horizon. He will presumably take a spot in this rotation at some point, probably this year. If not, it'll be next year. Could Ranger Suarez look to make a move to the bullpen? Could the Phillies try to convince him to make a move to the bullpen? There are a lot of variables at play here, right? But you have to love hearing that one of these guys who has been very clutch for you and has pitched really well, and previously had pitched very well in the postseason, wants to remain here. But it's going to be tricky. And Connor Allen is right. Not being able to capitalize on the Diamondbacks in 2023, a hurt Braves team last year, home field advantage could potentially be one of the biggest misses in Philly sports if they fail again. And I think that's fair. And I think that, like, of all the teams to have nerves around, it's probably this one. If there's a team to be skeptical of, it's this Phillies team. Now, I'm very clearly on the record about how I feel about this Phillies team, and I think that they're going to let a lot of people down. If they make a couple of tweaks to this lineup between now and October, potentially, maybe my thought will change. But as of right now, I go, eh. Now, I mentioned a guy a little bit ago, and it's somebody who I have the utmost respect for, and it's a player that I absolutely loved and adored as a member of the Phillies. And I heard some slander. And we're going to end the show here because I said that there was a media take that just drove me fucking crazy. And I don't know if the person did it because the ratings of their show are just kind of down. And there's probably no fix in sight for that show. But I saw a clip going around of John Kincaid. And John Kincaid had two of the dumbest takes I've seen or heard in recent memory. And it's pretty hard to do. I want you to hear what John Kincaid had to say about Roy Halladay. He also has to take about Allen Iverson. But let's just listen to the take about Roy Halladay. And, God bless Salchunas for not smacking him across the face. All right, let's hear it.
I'm going to tell you, this is going to be blasphemy to you.
Okay.
Roy Halladay's on the wall of fame for the Phillies. He ain't in the elite athletes of Philadelphia for me.
How can you?
Not in the elite athletes of Philadelphia. Roy Halladay. Roy Halladay, who was the best pitcher of his generation. Roy Halladay, who delivered a Cy Young. Roy Halladay, who led a Phillies team into multiple postseasons, had them in position to potentially go on long runs. The same Roy Halladay who was let down by his lineup in a game against the Cardinals that never should have happened, in a game where Chris Carpenter pitched a shutout and Halladay gave up a single run. A guy who threw a perfect game, a guy who threw a playoff no-hitter. Roy Halladay wasn't an elite athlete in Philadelphia? What does that mean? Not one of the elite athletes in Philadelphia sports history. He was arguably the best pitcher in baseball, and he was on your team. He was at the top of a rotation that had another Cy Young winner in Cliff Lee. It's very rare that in Philadelphia we get a player who is at the pinnacle of the sport. I'm not talking about, this is the best player at that position that a Philly team has had in a long time. Roy Halladay was the best pitcher in Major League Baseball for a number of years. The only reason he didn't have even more fanfare is because he was pitching for the Blue Jays. He not only dominated the AL East, not only put up Cy Young numbers for Toronto against talented lineups from the Yankees and the Red Sox, but he came to Philadelphia, won a Cy Young, threw a perfect game, a no-hitter in the playoffs, was at the top of a rotation that had multiple great pitchers, including Cy Young winner Cliff Lee, as well as Roy Oswalt, World Series MVP Cole Hamels and average Joe Blanton was at the top of that rotation, led this team. 8 innings, complete games, was an absolute workhorse, an elite athlete, and maybe the best player, not just pitcher, the best player, the most valuable player in baseball for years. To say that he doesn't belong among the list of the most elite athletes in Philly sports history is one of the dumbest fucking takes I have heard. And there are a lot of bad takes in Philadelphia, and that might be the worst one. Now, if the argument is, oh, he never won anything, he didn't win a World Series, well, that's going to disqualify a lot of very good players who also reached the pinnacle of their respective sports or came close to it. And to that I say, bullshit, because it's not an individual sport. Roy Halladay did everything he could when he played for this team to elevate this team and take them to a World Series and to win them a World Series. He was let down, especially in that series against the Cardinals. He was let down by his lineup that couldn't get a single run across home plate. He is easily one of the most elite athletes to ever play in Philadelphia. Now, if you want to make the longevity case, maybe there's a case to be made that Halladay didn't have a long, expansive career in Philadelphia. But the limited time that he was here, he was incredible. And then when you find out after the fact that there were some substance abuse issues at the end of his career, it makes a little bit more sense about the precipitous fall off that he had. And I do wonder, is part of this argument, even though it's not being explicitly said, is that being held against Roy Halladay? Is John Kincaid holding the end of Halladay's career and about the issues with painkillers? Is that being held against Halladay? Like if Halladay were currently a pitching coach for the Phillies, would he say the same thing? I wonder. I don't know. That was a terrible take. All right, but there's actually a second horrible take. And I'll also point out that longevity doesn't necessarily make a player elite. You can have a guy who plays their career in Philadelphia or in any city. I'm going to remove this for a second. You can have a guy who plays 10, 15 years or 10, 12 years in the same city and puts up an MVP season or puts up, great stats, is one of the best players at their position, all that, or could even be considered like a top 3 player at any given time. But they have a bunch of years that they're just underwhelming at best. Longevity doesn't necessarily mean anything. When he was at the peak of his powers in Philadelphia, Roy Halladay was arguably the best player in the entire game. Not just the National League, not just among pitchers. He was incredible. So that's a bullshit take. But it does get worse because then he has a second take.
Say that he won a damn Cy Young. He threw a perfect game.
He did.
That's one of the worst things you've ever said in your life.
First of all, the tenure this short. Can't do it.
I would rather you curse in my face.
You know why that's a stupid take too? Because my guess, and there's a pained expression here, and this is how I feel when I listen to this man talk. Pete Rose helped the Phillies win a World Series. Would somebody go as far as to say that Pete Rose doesn't belong as one of the best Phillies, at least from an impact perspective? Would Pete Rose not be considered one of the most elite athletes in Philadelphia sports history? It doesn't matter what his tenure was. Did he deliver? Was he at the pinnacle of his sport at any given time? Awful take. All right, we'll keep going.
And call me
we can do
bitch
that
before you say that.
Question 5, I call you a bitch. Is it? No, it has to be, it involves tenure. It involves consistency. It involves excellence.
He was
to me,
the pinnacle
it's got to be there. I'm going to annoy the hell out of you with this one. I'm going to annoy the hell out of you with this one. Julius Erving is there. Another guy that you idolize is not.
Who?
There's a certain guy that you idolize.
Don't tell me Iverson is not.
It's a short window of time. A guy who didn't take his craft seriously. A guy, no, absolutely not. We disagree on this one. He's not. I'm not going to put him at the same level. Someone who took their career seriously.
So that face that Salchunas is making. God loves Salchunas. I don't know how much he makes at 97.5, but he probably deserves a raise because to not reach over and just strangle this man as he's spewing this bullshit. I mean, all right, let's just play this one out. Allen Iverson is apparently not an elite Philadelphia sports player. We're not talking about the all-time greats in the NBA. We're talking about Philadelphia sports. So tenure was held against Halladay, but tenure wasn't a factor in Iverson being one of the best Sixers of all time. Iverson played the vast majority of his career in Philadelphia, took a bad Sixers team to an NBA Finals. They won a game against the Lakers. We know how I feel about that series, but handed the Lakers their only loss that postseason in the midst of a hell of a run and in the midst of a Lakers dynasty. I wasn't a huge Iverson fan. We all know Vince Carter was my guy. I loved Kobe. I cheered for the Sixers, and I wanted Iverson to win a title with the Sixers. But there were things about Iverson that I didn't like. I thought he played a very inefficient style of basketball. But here's the thing. Long tenure, was MVP of the league, led that team to an NBA Finals. Oh, and by the way, despite the fact that the man might not have enjoyed practice, and despite the fact that some considered him to not take the craft as seriously as John Kincaid apparently believes he did not take his craft seriously, it was hard to watch Allen Iverson, who was undersized at his position. It's hard to go back and watch games Allen Iverson played in and say that he didn't give the team everything he had. That guy got his ass kicked game in and game out. Now, could you argue that there were times that Iverson said or did things away from the court that drove you nuts? Sure. But Allen Iverson got his ass kicked every night. As an undersized player, pound for pound might have been the toughest son of a bitch in the National Basketball Association while he played in Philadelphia. The idea that he's not an elite player in the history of Philadelphia sports is insane. So just chalk it up. Don't forget, folks, instead of watching the Russ Joy Show, you could go listen to whatever the fuck John Kincaid talks about over on the radio. I feel like I understand why the ratings are what they are in the morning on radio. Interesting. We'll see if those hot takes work. Maybe they'll lead to ratings. I don't think they will. All right, that's it for today. I want to thank everybody who joined me live on YouTube, X, and Facebook. All of you who listen after the fact in the podcast feed, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, we have a lot of things going on under the Joy Media umbrella this week. Thursday, there's going to be an episode of It's Just Wrestling, recapping AEW Dynamite and previewing Revolution. We are going to also have a Press Row show at night. Friday, I'm back here at 8:30 a.m. doing the Russ Joy Show. And then Saturday and Sunday, 2 more episodes of the Press Row Show as the Flyers continue this very long homestand. So do me a favor, if you haven't done so already, like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Go into the comments section after the show is over. Let me know what I got right. Let me know what I got wrong. And, this is crazy. If I'm looking to confirm something here because I was doing the sign-off, but I just want to see if this came across or not. I don't know where Sean saw this, but Sean C. says that Derek Gunn just reported Brandon Graham retore his tricep in the Super Bowl. I don't see that on Twitter. I don't know where that's at. We will look to confirm that, and if it is true, we will talk about that on Friday's show. But friends, we are going to head out. And again, I want to thank all of you for joining me live. Do me a favor, like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Share it to, a couple of other friends, family members in your life. Let them know about the show. We have a lot of fun here 3 days a week and sometimes emergency pods. So everybody have a great rest of your day. I will talk to each and every one of you, maybe on It's Just Wrestling, maybe on the Press Row Show, but certainly here Friday morning at 8:30 a.m. on the Russ Joy Show. Until then, I've been Russ Joy, but you knew that already because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. Have a great day, everybody. I'll talk to each and every one of you very, very soon.